wake you up. My morning constitution will lift you up. Now gather round, listen up.
Welcome to another episode of My Morning Constitution. We are going to try to keep it under 10 minutes, keeping it real with real talk and shit that you wish you didn't know. But on today's note, we're going to try to take a little bit more serious route for you to change it up a little bit and talk about the negative effects of masculinity.
Yeah, it's a really fun topic. Me being the only guy on a podcast with two females, so a lot of really interesting questions. I was kind of hanging out with a few friends over the weekend, and not that they're overboard on that in any kind of way, but I would just my ear kind of tuned up with some behavior or some verbiage from some of the people in the groups here and there, and it kind of really made me think about toxic masculinity and where it stems from.
So I want to know, I'm dying to know what was said, what happened.
It's not anything major. It's just normal vernacular that we see used. And I was also doing a stand up or doing an open mic at a stand up, and I was watching comedians go up there, and it seems like in general when a guy doesn't like feedback, his general reaction is to say one of the negative connotations, like that B word for whatever. And then I was just wondering, like, why or what would kind of make a guy say that. And I was just wondering what y'all's experience was, and if you guys had any ideas on where it stems from.
I personally think it has to deal with lack of confidence. I think that those individuals had something at one point in their life, and again, I am no expert by any means, but this is just from personal experience with individuals that I've ran into that sound very similar to the ones that you're speaking of, CJ, is that something happened in one point of time that hindered their confidence. And so using those types of words or those phrases that are very negative makes them feel empowered, even though they should be empowered without that. But I feel that those types of words or saying or something condescending makes them feel better about possibly the person they are or the lack of confidence that they have in those moments. Swear words have been proven to increase somebody's confidence just by saying them, which is really crazy. There was an article that I read, I don't know, a while back that did a test on two focus groups, one who were each put into the same stressful situations where they could use swear words, and the other group was not allowed to use swear words while doing the task. And the focus group that was allowed to use swear words while trying to complete this task had a better success rate, and overall their emotions, they stated that they felt more confident. So I think it has to deal with something going on with their confidence or lack thereof.
I definitely agree with you, and I did not know about that study. That's an awesome study.
I'll have to try to find it and we can post it in the link. It was really interesting. A super short read.
Yeah, it sounds really good. Of course, my behavioral science brain goes, wait a minute. Was it that they performed better because they could swear, or did they perform better because they weren't inhibited at all? Because your brain then is saying, don't do this. At the same time, it's saying, accomplish this task. So you've got more going on in your brain, so to speak.
That's a really good point, too.
Yeah, very good point. I don't quite remember that deep into the study, but I just remember the gist of it. But I like where you're going because that's a very interesting question to take. Yeah, now I'm interested.
Yeah, what
I'm
does
gonna
that
try to find
mean?
it, right?
Yeah. So you're kind of thinking that the toxic masculinity part is coming from an insecurity on top of adding a swear word for empowerment, which is really interesting because that's actually basically in stand-up that's a lot of jokes and how some comedians prefer to put those out there. But that also kind of makes it the exact same thing if you look at it from a business sense, to where if you come across as like an overconfident woman, they give it a derogatory term instead of saying that, like, wow, she's really strong, she's really confident and powerful.
Yeah, you definitely get the, oh, she's arrogant. She gets XYZ. I think maybe I'm giving guys a pass on this. I think there definitely is toxic masculinity. I think it's sort of bred in our communities and in just everyday environment. Even if you open a magazine, pick any freaking magazine you want, even GQ to country and style living. I mean, doesn't matter the genre or the targeted audience. Women have one direction that we're, supposed to look, right? The advertisements of women, they're all beautiful and laughing and happy, right? We're the entertainers, and men are always sexy and serious, and they're the stoic, intelligent ones. And so we've kind of always been bred that this is how it is. And so now as we have, the Me Too movement and so many other, groups becoming empowered, at least in the States, although we do see this globally, I start to wonder how much it's this whole nature versus nurture, right? How much of this is what generations have been doing, and so you kind of have that Darwinism. It's built into us, and just been generation and generation of thinking this way, and therefore we do. And the nurture part, that's how you were raised. Maybe that's how the women in your life behaved, or the men in your life or women in your life spoke about the opposite gender. I think, Tina, you have an excellent point. I think a lot of it is also feeling empowered, and maybe as a lack of confidence thing. I definitely think that there's parts of that as well at play. Yeah, what do you think, CJ?
So I think you kind of hit a couple of things on the head there. I think it is a lot to do with the community and the people that I was talking to. I just kind of asked them a random question: how many females do you have a platonic relationship with? Like how many good friends do you have that are female? And the overwhelming answer is not many. So them not having a female in their life as a friend, to where when they hear something, you hear something like, oh, that may be offensive, or taking in that direction, it because they don't have that feedback loop. And then the other part is a little bit of the group think, to where, if you hang out with the guys all day and that's all you talk about is guy stuff, it kind of builds and compounds. And then also the lack of understanding the other gender, since you don't have that in your circle of friends, creates that lack of confidence and lack of understanding. So then the way to do that is to overcompensate by using the swear words and using the derogatory to build your own personal confidence. It's kind of where I'm thinking it stems from, like a culmination of those three things.
I love how you worded that. I completely agree. And I believe to both of your points, I see it as a subconscious behavior to it being embedded in us as growing up our entire lives, right? As children, think of cartoons. Cartoons still have the same theme, right? Male versus female, their jobs, what they're doing, what they're saying, how they're acting, relationships. So they learn it from early on as soon as you put a kid in front of a TV. So it's this subconscious behavior that you're learning. And to your point, CJ, I think it's almost a proactive activity, not an activity, but a proactive, I guess you could say, activity that you need to do, is to surround yourself around women and have those relationships with them to really understand. Because to your point, if you're hanging out with the guys all day and that's all you do and you don't have any other women friends, you can start to misunderstand like some of the communication that you might be having with women and vice versa and things like that, because it's just so subconsciously in your mind, because you've never really been proactive about making a change. And there's been, people have been complaining about changing cartoons. There's been a huge one just through Black Lives Matter with Paw Patrol, and that being a big thing because we're telling our kids that certain genders can only play certain roles in law enforcement and things like that. And so they're trying to change cartoons, but we're all afraid of change, right? We're all afraid and nervous to think in different ways that has been embedded into our minds or through our family or through history. So it's just a huge movement that's going on with so many different things. So this topic is really, really interesting to me. So yeah, I think you really have to be aware and make a point to have these relationships to really understand each other, if that makes sense.
Yep, I definitely agree with you.
Yeah, completely. And Chris, you bring up a great point is having those relationships. I think when you stereotype a gender or class of people or whatever it might be, look at us even talking in binary genders. How stereotypical of us, right? But I think when you classify or stereotype any group of people, it's hard to think of them outside of that. And our brains are, kind of goes back to this whole, it doesn't matter if it's really Darwin or whatever, it doesn't matter. But basically, right, we are built to kind of look for patterns because that keeps us safe. It allows us to be able then to identify things that are outside of that pattern, and then we know, okay, that's something that we need to be aware of. So your brain naturally looks for patterns, and that's why all those like different illusions and things like that, your brain fills it in. Or if you look at a jumbled word but the first and last letter are the same, your brain reads it just fine. That's because your brain is built, for whatever reason, we won't get into that, evolution or not, your brain is built to look for patterns. And so I think it's really hard or difficult to have relationships with another gender, there I'll make it plural, if you look at them as maybe a sexual object, so why would I become friends with a woman unless I'm dating her?
Yeah,
Why,
exactly. Yep, and there's a lot of guys that think that way, unfortunately. But I think, a guy should definitely have a lot more female friends if you're just a guy that has nothing but male friends other than the females in your life that you want to date. I definitely encourage guys to get out there and have a broader circle of friends on that to get a better perspective.
So let me ask you this, because I would love both of your opinions. Is there something that people who identify themselves as women, I don't know how else to say that, but you get what I'm saying, right? Is there a better way that we can contribute as women to kind of help with toxic masculinity? Or is that something that, we might just say, no, actually, you just stay away from that. If you see it, you stay away.
I think from like a female perspective, just say, hey man, that hurt. You shouldn't be saying that, or step up and say your emotions to it, and also be friends with guys that you have other intentions besides dating with. So, and I think it goes vice versa.
Agreed. I think standing up and saying how something made you feel, if it was negative, is really hard to approach an individual on that subject because you know that there's going to be an awkward portion of that conversation, or it's going to lead in a loss of a friendship or something. Hopefully, it's a positive outcome, right? But there's always that chance of it going downhill and something negative, excuse me, negative happening. So, tongue tied today. So I think that that's where we run into these issues. For example, in the workforce, if a male or a female, or anyone for that matter, says something to another individual that is inappropriate, how many times in the past has someone or one of us on this podcast let it slide because we didn't want to get into a potential confrontation with that individual because we already assumed that they wouldn't act respectively to what we were getting ready to tell them about our emotions. I'm definitely at fault for that. I've done it many of times because I've been nervous to approach that individual, and then it keeps happening and happening and happening. So we're reassuring their behavior that what they're doing is okay towards me as a woman. So I think that we enable it a lot more than we think we do by being nervous to just approach somebody and have an adult to an adult conversation about why. And if they backlash, then they're not really respecting you and they're not wanting to take the time to value your relationship. Hopefully, that individual will value your relationship and want to sit down and understand your side. So that I feel like a lot of it is is our personal fault because we're training these individuals. So I think to your point, CJ, is we have to step up and we have to approach them. And that's one way to make a big change. Is it going to be immediate? No, never. It's going to be long. And then you're going to have to be consistent about it to really make a change individually and through society or just in your workforce or wherever it may be. So that's one thing I know I need to personally be more aware and practice more often if that ever arises again.
I definitely agree, Tina. And guys can do a pretty simple thing when you're in the group. You got a bunch of guys around, and then it starts going down this route. You don't have to participate in the verbiage that's going on, and that's kind of an active, or a lot of people look at that as like a passive way. But at least that's what I found myself start doing. And then if it really goes overboard, or there's something that's like really really crazy, I'll say, hey man, I really disagree with that statement, and just not engage anymore in the conversation. It is a risk of not feeling to fit in, because then you kind of feel like, oh man, the group doesn't like me. But then again, do I really want to be with a group that is sitting around being that way?
Bingo. I mean, you absolutely hit the nail on the head, right? I think it's going to be far more powerful if other men in the group say, hey, that's not how I see it, than if a woman stands up. Because even if it's one-to-one, typically if it's in a work environment, the female's a subordinate, right? So there's a lot of risk. And you're just going to be labeled then as a bitch on top of a whatever, arrogant,
Very true.
whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And we've seen it even in Me Too, where your livelihood could be at stake. You could get fired. You could lose a huge client. So it's incredibly difficult. Even if you have the courage to say, hey, that really made me feel XYZ, which, by the way, takes a ton amount of reflection to be able, instead of just pop off and say, how dare you, F you, to reflect, kind of pull your thoughts in together and in a very kind and sort of open way, come to someone and say, hey, this is how it made me feel. So even that is an advanced skill in asking a lot of women, and could be very easily turned around against them, which is then compounding, right? It's negative reinforcement. If you take something away every time somebody does something, guess what? They stop doing it. So I think if men could stand up and say, that's not how I feel, all of a sudden, to your point, you get this group think, and if enough men are saying, no, that's not true at all, or that's not at all how I see it, then you've kind of got group think in reverse.
Yep, I definitely agree, and what you're spot on, Leslie, with it being harder to say, hey, look, that makes me feel. A very simple thing, which you just said a minute ago, which is, hey, I don't agree with that. So that makes it really easy. It's not attacking someone. You're just saying, hey, that's not me. That's not what I agree with or want to associate with.
Yeah, I definitely think it takes a good balance. And you bring up another great point is, sometimes there's a level of reflection that as a female we have to take, right? I know for myself personally, I can overcompensate. First of all, I get a ton of unsolicited advice, tons. And it's hysterical how much it conflicts. One person might say, you're not talking about yourself enough. You need to brag, like put it out there, ask for this, say that. And then the next person could say, oh no, you should never. So I think, and I don't think it's mansplaining. I genuinely do think it comes from a good place. But it can have, you can receive conflicting advice. And when you're not great at something, like when you try advice for the first time, you might screw it up. So that can be very challenging, just to be courageous enough to try something new. And then when it kind of gets thrown in your face, like, hey, maybe this wasn't such a good idea, or maybe it's toxic masculinity, whatever it might be across that sort of spectrum, then to kind of take a minute and reflect and say, okay, is there something I could have done better? Was I being a bitch? Because I can tell you sometimes I am a little too aggressive, because it works for men, or it works for some people in some situations. But I think it's really important not, and I know this is so overused, but it's so true, and I hope it sinks in with a lot more people. Equitable is not the same as equal. And so while we want genders to be treated equitably, it doesn't mean that they're treated equally. So, for instance, there are certain things that I'm not so great at, and I'm not going to grow any taller. So no matter how much I work out, I'm not going to be able to, change a light bulb without getting a ladder or whatever it might be. I
Yep.
mean, I'm using a goofball example, but there are differences between genders, and I don't want to ignore that or pretend it doesn't happen or doesn't exist. What I think we need to do, and there's a great book on this, is be able to highlight our strengths and work towards those. So maybe a man can get away with being more aggressive, but something that I can do, because I'm always looking, how can I impact this? What can I do? And selfish or not, that's the only thing I really can control. So that's why I look at it that way. Maybe there's something that I can do. Maybe there's a reflection point. Maybe there's, more guidance, or just getting to know myself better to say, yeah, maybe I did come off a little bit arrogant. Maybe I should do this, this, and this. And then go back to those, friends that you can say, hey, what do you think about this? Am I doing this right? Kind of check in.
I definitely agree with something you said there about. I think it makes sense to really understand the other gender and embrace the differences on there. It's like you can't play a baseball game with one first baseman. Everybody can't be on that base. So it's great to have the differences in people and gender, especially in your group of circles. It makes everybody stronger. It's actually the whole way you build a team, a sports team. So I completely love the fact that people are different and have a lot of different strengths. And I think the more people embrace that, the less uncomfortable they'll have it being around other genders and really understand that. And I think that'll help dwindle a little bit of the toxic masculinity there.
So let me ask you both a question. So piggybacking off of that and asking advice, I feel personally, depending on who I'm going to ask advice from, I get completely different answers. And this is, again, just personal experience. But if I ask some of my closest female friends, I'll get a very, oh yeah, it was great, great job, like very standard, don't want to hurt my feelings, not really direct, kind of what I already assume they're going to tell me when I ask. If I ask a male friend exactly what they would do differently or what their feedback is, I'll get a laundry list, and it's very positive, but it's constructive criticism. But I always find that interesting, personally, at least with my group of friends. Do you guys have that same experience? What do you think that is? Is that women just being emotionally self-aware and not wanting to come across as negative, and that's how we view as, pumping somebody up? Or how do you read that? Because I see that as a trend, at least across my close-knit friends, when I have asked them for personal feedback on
That's pretty interesting because I get
completely different, on
the
things
opposite.
across all topics.
Yeah, for me, I've noticed that if I ask my guy friends, "Hey, how did I do?" It's more along the lines of what you were saying with your girlfriends. I get more the pump up, "Hey, you did good, bro," blah blah blah. But if I ask female friends, their constructive criticism comes out as well, which I really appreciate having that constructive criticism. So that's why I seek, I guess, more advice out of that group. What's your experience, Leslie?
Yeah, I'm more of a person by person. I definitely have friends that I go to, and two of you being them, where I go, hey, what did you think about this? And I've just really always been like that, where I try to find a few key mentors, or you can call them whatever you want, but mentors where you can go, hey, what do you think about this? That can give you really honest feedback. I think Tina, you bring up a good point. I think, at least the way I was raised is more of you should be seen, not heard. And beauty was a big, big part of me growing up. I mean, never left the house unless you were on point, right? And you were kind of dolled up, your hair was combed, all that kind of stuff. And so, I think I could see why females might feel maybe intimidated by giving their honest opinion. I think we're also just kind of supposed to act like we don't have feelings. You know, how many times have you hidden the fact that you have your period? You know, like, this shit hurts, okay? My stomach's killing me right now. But you just can't bring it up, right? You got to pretend like, nope, I'm one of the guys. I'm good.
Very true. Sorry, teammate. TMI, CJ.
No, it's all good, all
Or
good.
maybe not. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe I'm
You know
just.
what I mean? I
You're
think
right.
we're
You're right.
just,
I mean,
oh, you broke up. What was that?
oh, I was just commenting that, you're right. I'm just thinking about that right now. And if you're having a crappy week and you just don't feel up to it, you're just not as upbeat. You're not naturally going to say, "Hey, I feel like crap. I'm on my period. I'm really sorry. Like, I'm just not with it this week. Like, my body is just drained." You don't say that, right? You keep it to yourself and you truck through and you put a smile on your face. So it's weird that, like, I just don't feel right saying that to people. I don't know. Maybe because I feel it's awkward because people don't do it, but maybe it is something we should do or tell people so they're aware. Maybe we all need to over communicate, and that's
You know,
that's
because you're right.
90%
If
of
it
the
was
battle.
allergies, if you're having allergies that day, you might say, God, I'm so sorry. My head's in such a fog right
Yep.
now. I've got these nasty allergies. But because it's, yeah, you're right.
And how many times have you heard a guy come to work and say, "Oh man, my leg hurts from playing football with the guys last weekend. I'm just not all there," or "We stayed out too late playing pickup soccer or something like that, and I'm not with it." So I mean, guys will let you know in a heartbeat over on the littlest thing.
I just had a guy client tell me all about his kidney stone. I mean, we probably spent a good 15 minutes
Lovely.
on a kidney stone, and I went, oh God. I mean, that's something that passes, and we all know how that passes, right? And I
Yep.
was thinking, like, God, there's no way I could really, how would I be able to talk about that? But it was completely fine. It was completely fine for them to be able to talk to me about that, you know? And it's not that kind of a relationship, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I think people should be able to talk about their feelings more openly, and what's going on with them, no matter really the topic in general. I got a feeling I'm gonna get a lot of fun comments in the comments section on this podcast from this one, but it's all good though. All good though. So speaking of things passing, I don't think we've been able to keep a morning constitution under 10 minutes yet, have we?
No, we have not. Coming in strong at 29 minutes. We'll come back with more on our next podcast, as well as a topic that we have not come up yet with, but we will, and it will be entertaining, and you guys will love it, and you'll laugh, and it will get you through your morning. So thank you again for joining my morning constitution. We did not keep it to under 10 minutes. Have a good rest of your day.
Get out there, give it a try.